Imlac Video Productions presents The Author's Outlet, featuring book signings and other appearances by authors in the Concord, Massachusetts area. The author featured in this program is Glenn Rifkin. He will be discussing his most recent book, Thoreaus Backyard, Musings from a Small Town. He'll be introduced by Jill Wassong from the Concord Bookshop.
Collection of some of the best columns into Thoreaus Backyard. But Glenn is also a business writer and has written a book called The CEO and the Monk, One Company's Journey to Profit and Purpose.
Right.
Purpose that is a Boston Globe, right? At least I got the CEO and the Monk in the right.
That's right.
And most recently also the MBA in a Box. And he must not need any sleep because he also writes for the New York Times. So, without further ado, Glenn is going to read a couple of columns from his book and discuss them, and then we have some books for sale if you're interested at the front desk. And I just want to add one quick note that this coming Sunday we have a children's author coming in, Rebecca Bond. She's written an illustrated book called This Place in the Snow. Thank you, and please welcome Glenn Rifkin.
Well, this is great. Thank you for all coming out to enjoy this evening with me. I'm really proud and honored to be here. I love this bookshop. It's one of the great bookshops around, and they do really wonderful things, and so to be part of it is a real honor. And I'm also honored that my mom came all the way up from New Jersey today to be part of this. So, and my beautiful wife Janie and my sons Ben and Cameron, and just great friends. So this is fun. As Jill said, this is a collection of my columns from the Concord Journal. I would be surprised if anyone here doesn't already know a lot about this. So I won't go into any real background. Let me start. I thought it would be appropriate as a reading tonight, because it is Hanukkah, to read a Hanukkah story. So this is one of the older columns that I've done from years back. In 1979, as a young writer for the Boston Phoenix, I was asked by my editor to do the obligatory Hanukkah story. Amid the crush of Christmas coverage, publications would inevitably run one or two Hanukkah pieces to appear politically correct and not offend the Jewish readership. It was mostly a silly sham, a gesture to a holiday that seemed to me, as a Jewish boy growing up in a Christian community in New Jersey, a poor cousin to the wonders of Christmas. Hanukkah was a joyous celebration, no doubt. I loved lighting the candles on the menorah, opening presents, spinning the dreidel. But all this paled in comparison to what was happening at my friends' houses, where there were Christmas trees, carols on the record player, stockings on the mantelpieces, and mountains of presents that seemed to climb to the ceiling. Hanukkah was fun, but Christmas was magic. While some Jews grew to be offended by the excesses of Christmas and its crass commercial stranglehold on our society, I fell in love with the holiday from afar, and secretly wished that I could somehow find a way to celebrate it as my friends did. It was nice to enjoy the carols on the radio and classic Christmas movies on television, but it just wasn't the same as being there. In that winter in 1979, not long after my father had died, I was empty and sad and feeling as if the impending holiday season would just swallow me up like a small boat in a big wave. I was in no mood to write about recipes for potato pancakes or innovative menorahs. Instead, I found a small Hanukkah miracle of my own. I had heard that Elie Wiesel, the noted author and Holocaust survivor, had begun teaching at Boston University. What, I wondered, did Hanukkah mean to him? Perhaps there would be a story there. When I called, Wiesel, a soft-spoken and gracious man, invited me to come to his office at BU. I was taken by this slightly built man with eyes that bespoke the deepest sadness and the most profound wisdom. When he spoke, I had to lean forward to hear each word, and he told me this story. It was December 1944, in the dark cold of the Auschwitz death camp. There, a small group of Jews did the unthinkable. They celebrated Hanukkah. Wiesel was a 16-year-old boy from the Transylvanian village of Siget. He remembers vividly how a close friend somehow got hold of some potatoes and a small bit of oil. It defied every logic, every safety measure or possibility Wiesel recalled. but very secretly we lit those candles and said the prayers. Had they been caught, they would have been killed on the spot. It was an act of hope in the midst of desperation, a desire to embrace life in a place of death, and observe the holiday against all odds. Wiesel survived Auschwitz and Buchenwald, and has spent a lifetime since writing and lecturing about the Holocaust, teaching religion and philosophy, championing causes for world peace, and coming to grips with being Jewish in a hostile world. He has won the Nobel Peace Prize and become an advisor to presidents, and he has never forgotten that one special Hanukkah. In fact, Wiesel had a childhood of wonderful Hanukkah memories, growing up in Romania as the dark pulse of fascism grew stronger around him and his family. Hanukkah was so totally different, he said. It was communication, it was friendship, it was visiting. The stories we heard, the beautiful stories about Judah the Maccabee. For a child in a small town in Eastern Europe surrounded with fear, it was important to know that a man named Judah the Maccabee was his ancestor. Unlike the assimilation of Jews into American society, Wiesel's life was clearly marked, a community ostracized, separated, and abhorred by those around them. They found their comfort and joy by embracing their heritage. Every holiday was important, especially this one that lasted so long, Wiesel recalled. We got one gift, a few pennies for Hanukkah gelt. There was something to looking at the candles. I loved that, to watch them grow one more and one more. The ceremony of lighting the candles was very beautiful, very touching. Wiesel could not comprehend the idea that Hanukkah had evolved in America as a weak imitation of Christmas, an excuse to include Jewish children in the holiday season. We never took cues from the Christian world, he told me. For us, Hanukkah was a genuine tradition that we inherited from century to century. We looked forward to Hanukkah just like we looked forward to the High Holy Days. I wrote this story for the Boston Phoenix, and it remains one of my favorites after, I say 18 years here, but 25 years, and more articles than I can count. It changed Hanukkah for me forever. I still love Christmas and its twinkling lights, but now, when Hanukkah comes, it calls up an image of this small group of Jews lighting a light in the darkest night. In a season of miracles, it is the one I remember. And I could read another, or I could take some questions first.
Was it 18 or 25?
It was 18 when I wrote it. How's that? Maybe I'll just read
How
a second.
long was the piece? I mean, how did it go over with the editor?
Oh, it went over really well. It was Elie Wiesel, who's now pretty connected to Boston University and known around here. He had just really arrived, so there was not that many people who really knew that he was there. So it was. I was told, the sort of the best Hanukkah piece they'd had, because really that's what they would do. They'd write pieces about making latkes and, just sort of throw a bone.
Yeah.
So it went over well, and it really was important to me. So it's a great one. And he is an amazing guy. He does a series of lectures. I think he still does them every fall at Boston University, and they're always sold out. And he's very soft-spoken, but to hear him is mesmerizing. He's a really special person.
Any columnists that you particularly like or model you're writing after? That you just read?
That's a good question. It's always good to plant a friend in the audience with a good question. This book, I think, there are columnists that I love, but I think that it would be pretty safe to say that the one columnist, the writer who really inspired me for these kinds of columns was Annie Lamott, who many of you may know wrote Bird by Bird and Operating Instructions. She's actually a novelist, but I think her best work are the columns that she's written for different publications and for Salon.com, which she's on regularly. She has a book called Traveling Mercies, which is a series of her take, and I tip my hat to her, because if I could ever be the writer that she is, it would be pretty amazing. So she's really the one. She's very funny and very poignant and moving, and a great Annie Lamott story. She and I became friends over the telephone and email for a few years, and had a long distance kind of friendship going with that, and talked about life. And she came to Boston on a book tour. One of her novels had come out. She was going to do a similar thing at the at the Brattle Theater in Cambridge, and she has a very big following. I mean, she's sort of a cult figure, and I took Ben over with me to meet her. You were what, about 7? It was a while ago, and we always remember it because Ben brought one of his Beanie Babies, which he gave to Annie to take on the stage with her when she got up to speak, and she ended up holding up Ben's Beanie Baby and thanking Ben publicly in front of a sold-out standing room only theater. It was a big moment for me. I don't know about other Ben. I see some other friends in the back. Hi, guys. Hi, Dave. My roommate from college, hadn't seen in 30 years, found out he lived down the street in Concord. How's that? Dave Butler, folks.
What Beanie Baby was?
You would remember. Good
Oh,
memory.
okay. Well, sometime when you remember, let me know.
It was some kind of a cat.
Wow.
He's still got them all, too. He's waiting for their price to go up in value on eBay. I was going to read one more, and I thought appropriately it would be the title piece that sort of speaks a little bit about how I feel about Concord, where most of you know already I don't live in Concord anymore, but I did live in Concord and sort of feel very much attached to this town as opposed to Acton, great town, but my life sort of is focused on Concord. Mike and I play basketball, George and I play basketball here, and just a special place. So this is called Thoreau's Backyard. Sunday morning breakfast at the Colonial Inn. Omelets, fresh coffee, croissants, and homemade waffles. The smell of the bacon and maple syrup drift across the air like gustatory sirens. There is no possible way to sit in these rooms and not feel the weight of a different time and the gathering of voices that reside in the walls and ancient floorboards. If there are ghosts, they are present, lined up in period costumes from long ago days when the sound of horses' hooves clip-clop just past diners on ancient mornings. Outside, the summer air is heavy with the humidity of early August and the certainty of later rain. The heaviness begets a stillness, anticipation of a breeze that doesn't come. The sound of riders resting by their bicycles on the common moves along toward the veranda, literal as something just short of words. My friends from New York express their admiration for this sacred spot, visiting for the first time and getting breakfast and a taste of this small, remarkable town in one sitting. I have brought others to this place for maiden visits, and the response is always the same. Yet I never tire of hearing the newborn admiration, as if they were praising my child. There is something both odd and rejuvenating about living in a destination. Here, in Thoreau's backyard, we dwell on the edge of taking it all for granted, but never quite get beyond that moment of surprise or pride or irony or wonder. This old North Bridge could have been anywhere, really, and yet it is here, fording this river and these hallowed banks where a million ghosts really do reside and stamp their approval at this notion of never forgetting. I myself came from far away, both geographically and emotionally, to touch such a small town and make contact. It is this collection of names and faces and places that are simply my own snapshot in the continuum. Who will remember this Sunday morning in 100 years on this porch in the hot summer of tomorrow? Will locals parade around in the shorts and t-shirts of our day to commemorate a new ancient time? We walk along the street with bunting and bricks and the incongruities of tying past to present. We look at notices of $3 million homes in realty office windows and then reach out to touch the dates and names on the ancient markers in the shade of a midtown graveyard. There's the temptation to lie down flat in the green grass and close one's eyes and feel the sanctity of this ground. We almost never do. We almost always keep walking with the surety that the next visit will afford new luxuries of time and space. In the bookstore window, there is a display of the new works of an author who will read his words that very afternoon. Inside, the dark mahogany shelves are lined with thousands of books that form an irresistible lure to those who love words or browsing or the smell of bookshops on summer mornings. Stories in books, stories on the sidewalks, stories floating across the centuries. So many writers stopped here to form their words. So many still do. I very rarely grow philosophical about my visits from home to the center of town. There's always a task or a meeting or simply something else, somewhere else to go. There is a larger world of continents and politicians and oceanic skies that always intrude and block perspective. There's always so much to think about, to hear about, to do. And yet when my friends are ready to drive away, back to their own places, their own homes, their own green lawns, I hand them this memory of a visit to a small town whose church bells pierced the hot summer air. I wish them a safe journey and a last quick glance, and I invite them to come back with all their belongings to stay forever. And they laugh, not at the absurdity, but at the sheer wonder of such an idea. Who would not want to live right here, smile at familiar faces, walk through distinct streets with perfect houses and shade trees and dreams? When the rain finally arrives, it is strong and draws hissing steam from the overheated streets. The luscious midsummer greens grow wet and verdant, and the white clapboard and fences are almost luminous against the darkening sky. I have the urge to leave my car behind the camera shop and walk off breakfast in the miles to Walden. Walden is just a pond, like Concord is just a town. And I am not the last one who wishes he could walk along this road forever. Harry.
What are the satisfactions of being a columnist?
I can always put my friends in the columns. Yeah, there's a friend back there, an author, Dave DeLong, who has a great new book out called Lost Knowledge. Just a little plug. I have found that this is a really amazing outlet. The satisfaction just comes from trying to say something meaningful in a really short number of words, a small number of words, and I just enjoy constructing the sentences, thinking about how something feels, going back, doing it again, and then when it comes out, you know, it's an interesting thing with the Concord Journal. The paper never gets letters when people like something. They only get letters when people are mad or angry. So if I write anything political, I always get letters from angry Republicans. I'm sorry. But every once in a while I'll walk down the street or I'll run into somebody and they'll say, I read this column and it just really touched me and it made me feel really good. And that's the satisfaction. That's what makes me want to do it. It's just the ability to touch somebody's lives, and this book just is sort of a fascinating story because I've published a bunch of books with real life publishers, and this one I'm actually doing myself. This is a self-published attempt, and we could talk about that all night, which I won't go into, but it's really different and really fascinating. A lot of craziness involved in doing it, and yet it is so satisfying already just to have done this because I'm getting this really nice feedback from people that's just telling me that the effort was worthwhile. So I think a column does this in a way that many other vehicles can't. You know, especially in a world where people don't seem to take the time to read, you know, thick books anymore, which is a shame because they should. But this is a way to do it in 800 words or less.
Thank you.
When you were writing those, obviously you were writing them for the Concord newspaper, but did you sort of see yourself as explaining parts of Concord to an audience that hadn't explored or seen something the way you had? Did you envision an audience outside Concord? Were you thinking just for yourself and just getting down in print what you had been observing?
That's a great question. I think on most of them, I wasn't just thinking about the Concord audience. I always thought that the pieces could, you know, extend. They could, as the book says, it's really for small towns anywhere. So I think that the motivation would just be to say I have something to share. I think the people in Concord would really appreciate it. Having this audience, even though the Concord Journal circulation is pretty small, I actually don't even know what the circulation is. there was just always a sense that if you could really touch that audience, then it would just have a spillover effect. And so, so I really think I would think beyond that, and then sort of focus it down. Every once in a while, something would just be specific to the town. Like the last piece that I just read, I think I would assume it would touch people more who live here or know much about Concord.
You made me think of my small town.
Yeah?
I'm not from here, so.
Great, there you go. So,
What are your two favorite pieces?
two favorites, wow.
Two that you're proudest of?
Let's see. That's good. Well, one that I really love is about basketball, because I love basketball, and I see some of my friends here I play with, and so it was fun to be able to write something about that. But I think the favorite pieces would be the pieces about my family. So I have. Said I wasn't going to do this. So there are a couple about my kids and my wife that I really am proud of.
And why Thoreau's Backyard? You mentioned in an essay, there's obviously a lot of other people who've come through Concord. You evoked all of them. Does Thoreau mean something to you particularly?
All right, well, the secret is that Thoreau's Backyard was actually a name suggested to me by my friend, who I don't see here of all of my friends, but somebody had suggested to me as a possible name that would work for this, and I just, the minute he said it, I thought that it really did work. And, in fact, you know, Thoreau's message, I feel fairly strongly about, really resonates with the reason that he remains such an important figure in this town is because of, you know, his views on life and the Walden experience, and, you know, simplifying, etc., and that part of living in a place like this sort of brings you back to that almost inevitably, and so, you know, I'm sure there are people in this town who are all caught up in all the things, anybody anywhere, but there is something that would bring you back to the idea that life can be brought down to, you know, certain basics that could make it, you know, just that much more fulfilling. And so that just resonated with me, and I thought it worked.
Are you going to do a large print version? Self-publisher. My dad would love a large print version.
Oh wow! Don't even know. I have to talk to my technical friend on this and see if it's even possible. I'm lucky that I got this. I should say a word. Deborah Stark is here, who we all know, or most of us know, and one of my great friends, and her brother David, who is right now in Oakland, California, and I only wish he was here because this book really wouldn't exist without David, and so I should just say a thank you to him. He's a brilliant designer. If you like the cover, David's responsible. He made all the pieces work inside, and basically pushed me to do this when I was resisting for a long time, that I just didn't see any value to it or that anybody might be interested. But he was very persistent. Said we should do this. It'll be fun, and he was definitely right. Very rewarding. So it's been a labor of love to self-publish a book, let me tell you, and that makes it even more special. So, anybody else?
Just out of curiosity, you mentioned this self-published. Can you describe that a little bit, as opposed to sort of more traditional? I'm not in the publishing world, but I'm just curious about that process.
Well, that's a good question, because I wasn't either, and I'm in the publishing world, and, you know, traditionally when you publish a book, essentially, you know, you, as the writer, you're responsible for getting a manuscript to the publisher, and then they just take over. And all of the, you know, the mechanical steps along the way get taken care of for you, including the distribution of the book out into the real world. There was always an opportunity to self-publish, but in, you know, days past, it was sort of like a desperation for authors who had no other way to get published. I think it was called Vantage Press or something like that, and I believe they still exist. And for all sorts of money that you would pay them, they would do the same thing for your book. And I never heard anybody tell me that they had a successful experience doing that, although that's not to say it didn't happen. What's happened now with the internet is all bets are off, and there's almost not a real need for a big-time publisher other than the weight and the reputation that they might have in distribution. But the physical process to put this book together, literally, first of all, you need to either know a great designer who wants to work with you, or you have to pay somebody to do the things like the cover and the interior, stuff like that. Once you have that in the software, the website that I'm using is called Lightning Source, lightningsource.com. They're part of Ingram, which those in the book world know is a huge distributor of books, and Ingram decided to start this for people who wanted to do this. And you open an account, you upload the software, 3 days later they send you the book for a proof, you look it over, if it's good, you click on the button, and then you can order however many copies you want, from 1 up to 10,000, and they automatically bill you and send you the books, and it's an amazing thing. And then you got to sell them. Hence.
Like, did you think about putting any of the stuff that you've written for other periodicals in this book, or was it didn't that theme? Was it just simpler to not do copyright questions?
There actually is one that I snuck in that was not a Concord Journal story column, and it's called The Ride, and it was written for the New York Times, but don't tell them because I don't want to get into copyright hassles with them. So all of you are sworn to secrecy. But it was one that I wrote for the Times, thought it worked really well as a column for the Journal if I had done it that way, and the version they ran was so edited up that I just ran my original in the book, which is much better, I thought. And so but everything else was a Concord Journal column.
It just was easier that way for you.
No, I mean, these are the columns. This is this is all I would have. I mean, anything else I would have written would not have been in this genre. They would have been, as you know. I mean, Mike and I worked at Computer World together a long time ago.
But you've written for Rolling Stone, and
yeah, well,
magazine.
But those were like stories, not necessarily that would fit as a column. So.
To tap into some different writing part of yourself to do interest columns like this as compared to business writing?
Oh yeah. I think that these pieces, are really always emotion based. I mean, there'd be no way to. Maybe some are less so than others, but most of these I think would be, sort of emanate from some emotional place, whereas my business writing is a job. And even though I enjoy some of it a lot, and it's fascinating, and I try to do the best that I can, it's just not, it doesn't sort of raise the same issues, it doesn't raise the same kind of emotions in any way. So yeah, I think it's different. If I can sell a lot of these, I would much rather do this writing than the business writing. So, that's a place I'd like to get to.
Glenn, I should know this, but are you still writing the columns? Or?
I am, actually, yeah. I had one in last week about Dave and his new book, Lost Knowledge, which did I mention? And I am. And, it's just this great little outlet. It's a little connection that I made, and I mean, there are times I actually have tried to find other places to sell the columns, bigger audiences. I thought about the Boston Globe, and I even tried the Boston Globe, and it just didn't connect in the way that would have made it okay for me to do it. At the Concord Journal, as you may read, and if you read the introduction to this, the deal I had with them originally was, when I was asked to write for them, I said, I don't think you could afford me, because they were paying the princely sum of $45 for a column, which they don't pay anymore. So, but the editor was persistent, and she said, but it'd be really nice if you did this. So I said, well, the only way I'll do this is if I can write whatever I want, as long as it's tasteful, and nobody edits it. And I even get to write the headline. And she said, yeah. And I said, all right, I'll do that. That's how it started.
Maybe one more question.
Oh, okay, yeah. Need to leave some time because these guys are going to close up pretty soon, so.
But also, we want to leave time for you to sign and
Sign some books, okay.
anybody wants to buy them.
Any other questions?
Any plans on writing any more books in the works?
Well, I'm actually working on a book now, another business book, with J.D. Power and Company, the customer satisfaction people, and I believe I will not have my name on that, so you guys just have to look out for that. This kind of thing, yeah, I actually have some thoughts about other books. I have a book about my dad that I want to work on, that I kind of already started working on, that I think is going to be a project I'm going to focus on, and maybe I'll have to publish it myself, you know, but that'll be okay. Well, thank you all. This has been great. I really appreciate it.